She gave a homeless man a warm meal and lost her job for it. What happened next left everyone speechless. It was just another regular Tuesday evening in Lexington, Kentucky. The smell of coffee lingered in the air as the chatter of a few late-night diners hummed in the background. The Lakeside Grill wasn't exactly known for its charm. It was a small, no-frills joint just off the highway, popular with truckers, night shift workers, and the occasional local looking for a cheap bite. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. For Alina Carter, the 28-year-old waitress balancing two jobs, the diner had become her second home over the past year. She'd mastered the art of serving lukewarm coffee with a warm smile and nodding politely through the endless stories of regulars. Her tips weren't great, and the hours were grueling, but she powered through. Alina wasn't one to complain. She'd been through worse. As the clock neared 10 p.m., the rain began to pour. It was one of those relentless storms, where the water seemed to bounce back up from the pavement. Alina glanced out the diner's foggy window, wiping it with her sleeve to get a clearer view. That's when she noticed him. A man sat huddled under the diner's awning, clutching a threadbare blanket to his chest. He was drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. Alina had seen homeless people around before, but something about him caught her attention. He wasn't panhandling or shouting for help. He just sat there, staring at the puddles forming near his feet. She couldn't help but feel a pang in her chest. He looked cold, hungry, and completely defeated. Alina tried to push the thought aside as she cleared off a table. It wasn't her problem, right? She had bills to pay, rent overdue by 2 weeks, and her own problems to deal with. But as she walked back toward the kitchen, her steps slowed. The diner's owner, Greg Holston, wasn't exactly known for his generosity. In fact, Greg had made it crystal clear that he didn't want his employees wasting resources on anyone who couldn't pay. "We're running a business, not a charity," he'd grumbled just last week when a customer asked for a free refill. But as Alina peered through the kitchen door and saw the fresh stack of leftover burgers that would inevitably be tossed out by the end of the night, the thought of that man sitting outside gnawed at her. Alina glanced around to make sure Greg wasn't nearby. He was out front, busy chatting up a trucker at the counter. Quietly, she grabbed a to-go box and loaded it with a burger, some fries, and one of the small chocolate chip cookies meant for kids. Her heart raced as she walked toward the back door, the box tucked under her arm like a secret she wasn't supposed to share. When she stepped outside, the cold rain hit her face instantly. But she didn't care. She crouched down beside the man, offering the box. "Hey, I thought you might be hungry," she said softly. The man's eyes widened in disbelief. He hesitated before reaching out, his hands trembling as he took the box. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Alina smiled faintly, standing up, but as she turned to head back inside, she had no idea her simple act of kindness was about to change her life forever. But Alina's night wasn't over yet, and neither was the storm brewing inside the diner. The man didn't open the box right away. He just sat there, holding it, staring at the steam that escaped through the edges. Alina paused for a second, watching him. He looked like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. His face, weathered and tired, was etched with gratitude. "It's not much, but it should help," she said, giving him a small smile. Before he could respond, the sound of the back door swinging open startled them both. Alina turned quickly, her heart dropping as she saw Greg standing there, his arms crossed, and an expression that could freeze fire. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Greg's voice was sharp and loud enough to carry through the rain. Alina swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. He looked hungry. I just gave him some of the leftover food. It was going to be thrown out anyway." Greg cut her off, stepping closer until he was towering over her. "I don't pay you to make decisions like that," he snapped. "Do you have any idea how much this business costs to run? Every dollar counts, Alina." Alina's cheeks flushed with anger, but she held her tongue. She knew better than to argue. Greg wasn't the type to listen to reason, and the last thing she needed was to make him even angrier. "It was just one meal," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I thought—" "You didn't think, Alina," Greg barked. "That's the problem. If you want to give handouts, do it on your own dime, not mine. Get back inside, now." The homeless man, still sitting quietly, looked up at Greg, then back at Alina. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but Alina shook her head subtly, her eyes pleading with him not to say anything. Reluctantly, she turned and walked back into the diner, Greg following close behind. Her face burned with humiliation as she passed the other customers, who were now staring at her with a mix of curiosity and awkwardness. She tried to focus on cleaning a table, hoping the moment would pass. But Greg wasn't done. "Everyone listen up," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chatter. "This is what happens when employees think they can do whatever they want." He pointed at Alina. "You're fired. Effective immediately." Alina froze, her stomach dropping. "What? Greg, please, I—" "Pack your things and get out," he said coldly, turning his back on her. The diner fell silent. The regulars, who had come to know Alina as the hard-working waitress who always greeted them with a smile, exchanged uneasy glances. No one said a word. Alina stood there for a moment, stunned. She wanted to scream, to argue, to make him understand that she was just trying to do the right thing. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Greg had made up his mind. She walked to the back room, grabbed her jacket and bag, and made her way toward the door. Her co-workers avoided her gaze, and the customers suddenly found their plates very interesting. As she stepped outside into the rain, she felt a lump rise in her throat. Her chest ached, not just from the humiliation, but from the uncertainty of what came next. How was she going to pay rent? What would she tell her landlord? She pulled her jacket tighter around herself and glanced over at the man she'd given the food to. He was gone. The to-go box sat neatly on the bench, empty. Alina sighed, tears mixing with the raindrops on her face. But just as Alina thought the night couldn't get any worse, a pair of headlights cut through the rain, and her life took a turn she never saw coming. The rain kept coming down in sheets, the cold biting through Alina's thin jacket. She stood at the edge of the parking lot, unsure of where to go. Her car was old, unreliable, and parked several blocks away because Greg didn't want employees taking up customer spaces. She hadn't thought ahead, hadn't brought an umbrella, and now everything, her job, her dignity, her future, felt like it was slipping through her fingers as quickly as the rain. She took a deep breath, willing herself not to cry, not here where anyone could see. She couldn't afford to look weak, even if she felt like the world had just crumbled beneath her. Then, the sound of tires crunching against wet gravel snapped her out of her thoughts. A sleek black car, a luxury sedan, its windows tinted, pulled into the parking lot. The headlights illuminated the diner's faded sign and flickered off as the car came to a stop. Alina squinted, trying to make out who it was. It didn't look like a regular customer's car. She hesitated, her instincts warning her to be cautious, but there wasn't much she could do. She had nowhere else to go. The driver's door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, the kind Alina had only ever seen in magazines or on TV. His shoes shone even in the rain, and he held an umbrella that seemed more expensive than her entire wardrobe. The man walked toward her, his pace steady and unhurried. As he came closer, Alina could see that he wasn't much older than her, maybe in his mid-30s. His face was calm, but his eyes carried an intensity that made her uneasy. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "You're the waitress from inside, right?" Alina blinked, startled. Yeah. I mean, I was. Not anymore." He tilted his head slightly, as if amused by her response. "I saw what happened in there, with the food, and your boss." Her stomach tightened. "Look, I don't know who you are, But if you're here to tell me I shouldn't have done it, save your breath. I don't regret it." The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "I'm not here to lecture you." He glanced toward the diner, where Greg was visible through the window, wiping down the counter with the same scowl he always wore. "I'm here because what you did impressed me." Alina frowned, unsure if she heard him right. "You're impressed?" He nodded. "Not many people would do what you did, risk their job to help someone in need, especially in front of someone like him." He gestured toward Greg with a slight tilt of his head. Alina crossed her arms, unsure where this was going. "Well, it didn't exactly work out for me, did it?" The man chuckled softly, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Maybe not yet, but I believe people like you deserve better." She stared at him, confused. "Okay, who are you?" He extended a hand. "Jason Adler. I own a chain of restaurants across the Midwest. Upscale places, fine dining, high standards. And people like you. People with integrity, who do the right thing even when it costs them. Those are the people I want working for me." Alina blinked, her brain struggling to process his words. "You're offering me a job?" "Yes," Jason said simply. "Not just any job. A managerial position, good pay, benefits, a fresh start." Her mouth opened, then closed again. It sounded too good to be true. "Why? You don't even know me." Jason's expression softened. "I know enough. I saw you put someone else's needs above your own. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Alina felt her chest tighten, but this time it wasn't from fear or anger. It was something else. Hope. But even as Alina listened to Jason's offer, a small, doubtful voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Was this for real, or was it just another storm waiting to break?" Alina stood there, her shoes sinking slightly into the water pooling beneath her. Jason's words hung in the air, almost too surreal to believe. A managerial position? Good pay? Benefits? It sounded like the kind of thing people dreamed about but never actually got. She shifted her weight awkwardly, crossing her arms tighter against the rain. "I don't know," she said, her voice cautious. "It just seems... Why would you do this for me? You don't even know my work experience, or if I'm qualified for a position like that." Jason tilted his head, studying her. "You're right. I don't know every detail about your resume, but I know what I saw tonight. That's what matters most to me." She furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" Jason gave a faint smile. "In my line of work, I meet all kinds of people. Chefs, servers, managers, investors. Most of them are skilled, but skill isn't everything. Compassion, honesty, courage, those things are hard to find. And tonight, you showed all three." Alina looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her bag. She wanted to believe him, but she couldn't shake the years of hearing otherwise. "I don't know," she muttered. I'm not used to things working out like this." Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. "I get it. Life's probably taught you to be skeptical. But sometimes, opportunities show up when you least expect them. All I'm asking is for you to think about it." For a moment, Alina felt the weight of her doubts pressing down on her. But then she thought about the look on that homeless man's face when she handed him the food. The genuine gratitude in his eyes. That wasn't something you could fake, and it wasn't something she could forget. Before she could answer, the diner door swung open behind her. Greg stood in the doorway, squinting against the rain. His voice was sharp as ever. "Alina, what are you still doing here? I told you to get off my property." Jason turned his head slowly, his expression calm but unreadable. He spoke before Alina could. "You're Greg, I assume." Greg frowned, clearly sizing him up. Yeah, what's it to you? Jason extended a hand, though Greg made no move to take it. Jason Adler. I own Adler Hospitality Group. I'd heard about this place through word of mouth. Stopped by to see if it lived up to the reputation. Greg raised an eyebrow, clearly thrown off. Well, we're a small operation. Not exactly fine dining, but we get by. Jason nodded thoughtfully. I noticed. Though I have to say the way you treat your staff might explain why the place isn't doing better. Alina's eyes widened as Greg's face turned red. Now hold on a second, Greg started, but Jason cut him off. No, you hold on, Jason said, his tone still calm but firm. I watched you fire an employee tonight for showing compassion. Not for stealing, not for breaking the law, just for doing what any decent human being would have done. And if that's how you run your business, it's no wonder the parking lot's half empty. Greg's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Jason turned back to Alina. You deserve better than this, and I'm prepared to offer it to you. Alina felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. She squared her shoulders, meeting Greg's glare head-on for the first time. I think I'll take you up on that offer, she said, her voice steady. Jason smiled. Good choice. Greg muttered something under his breath and stormed back into the diner, slamming the door behind him. For the first time that night, Alina let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The rain didn't feel as cold anymore, and the heaviness in her chest started to lift. But even as she walked toward Jason's car, a question lingered in her mind. Was this really the start of something new? Or was she setting herself up for disappointment all over again? The inside of Jason's car was warm and pristine, a sharp contrast to the wet, chaotic night Alina had just endured. She sat in the passenger seat, clutching her bag tightly as Jason navigated the rain-soaked streets. The soft hum of the engine and the faint sound of jazz playing on the radio filled the silence. Jason glanced over at her. You don't have to look so tense. I'm not going to bite, he said with a small chuckle. Alina forced a nervous laugh. Sorry. It's just... I've never had anything like this happen to me before. He nodded, his eyes on the road. Understandable. But trust me, this isn't some kind of scam or charity case. I'm offering you this because I see potential. That's it. They pulled into the parking lot of a modern building with sleek glass doors and glowing signage that read, Adler Hospitality Group. Jason parked and stepped out, motioning for Alina to follow. As they entered, Alina was struck by the contrast between this place and the diner she'd just left. The lobby was bright and polished, with photos of elegant restaurant interiors lining the walls. A receptionist greeted Jason warmly, her eyes briefly flicking to Alina with curiosity, but no judgment. Jason led Alina into his office, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He gestured for her to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. All right, he began, settling into his chair. Let me explain how this is going to work. Alina leaned forward slightly, her nerves still buzzing. I manage several restaurants, Jason said. Most are high-end, but I also have a few casual spots for families and middle-income customers. What I need is someone who understands people, customers and employees alike. Someone who can create an environment where people want to be. He paused, letting his words sink in. I can teach you the technical stuff. Inventory, scheduling, cost control. That's all easy. What I can't teach is empathy. That's what you already have. And that's why I want you on my team. Alina blinked, stunned. You're serious about this? Jason smiled. Completely. You'll start as an assistant manager at one of our casual spots, with full training. If it goes well, you'll move up to running your own location. Sound fair? She nodded slowly, her mind spinning. This felt too good to be true, but Jason didn't seem like the kind of man who played games. "Why don't we start with a tour of the place?" he suggested, standing up. The next hour flew by as Jason showed her around the company's headquarters, introducing her to a few key team members and explaining the basics of how his restaurants operated. For the first time in years, Alina felt a spark of excitement, not just about the job, but about the possibility of a future that didn't involve struggling paycheck to paycheck. By the time Jason dropped her off at her apartment, the rain had stopped and the clouds were beginning to clear. Alina climbed the stairs to her tiny studio, still trying to process everything that had happened. She stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. The next morning, Alina returned to the Lakeside Grill, not as an employee, but to speak to the man she'd helped the night before. She found him sitting on the same bench, now with a slightly cleaner shirt and a small backpack at his feet. "Hey," she said, approaching him cautiously. He looked up, surprised. "You're back?" Alina smiled. "I wanted to check on you. You doing all right?" The man nodded, his expression softening. "That meal last night. It was the first real food I'd had in days. Thank you." She sat down beside him, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "I might not be working here anymore, but I got a new job. And with it comes some resources. Here's a list of places you can go for help. Shelters, food banks, even a few job placement programs." His eyes filled with tears as he took the paper. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," she said. "Just pay it forward when you can." But what Alina didn't realize was that her small act of kindness had already set off a ripple effect, one that would continue to touch lives in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Alina's life didn't magically transform overnight. The new job came with its own challenges, learning how to manage staff, understanding complex operations, and stepping into a role she'd never envisioned for herself. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a purpose. The man she'd helped outside the diner, whose name she later learned was Terence, found his way to one of the shelters she recommended. A few weeks later, she got a handwritten note from him, thanking her again and telling her he'd been accepted into a vocational training program. Jason kept his word too. Under his mentorship, Alina flourished in her role, eventually earning a promotion to general manager at one of his upscale restaurants. Her paychecks no longer felt like a constant source of anxiety, and she began to see the world not just as a place of struggle, but as a place of opportunity. But what stuck with her most was the lesson she learned that night at the diner. Kindness doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it costs you something, a job, your pride, even the approval of those around you. But in the end, it always comes back in ways you can't predict. Alina's story is a reminder that the smallest acts of compassion can set extraordinary events in motion. What if she'd ignored Terence that night, letting fear of her boss's rules stop her? What if Jason had chosen not to intervene, brushing off her situation as someone else's problem? These what-ifs are important because they remind us of the power we hold in every decision we make. To those watching, your kindness matters, even if it's not acknowledged right away. Whether it's helping someone in need, standing up for what's right, or simply showing empathy when it's easier not to, you never know the impact your actions might have, not just on others, but on yourself. So here's my challenge to you. Find an opportunity to help someone today. It doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. Sometimes all it takes is a meal, a kind word, or even just a smile to remind someone that they're not invisible. And who knows? That small act of kindness might just be the start of something bigger than you could ever imagine.